Welcome to the Super Gamer Podcast. Welcome to the new Super Gamer Podcast, episode 179. Our guest this week is an editor, a writer, a video gamer, a podcaster. We have Jay Castello. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's start with podcast because you host an Ace Attorney analysis podcast called Turnabout Breakdown with Diego Arguello. I should have looked that up. I'm sorry.
Sure.
I'm so sorry. But what surprises me, you've been doing this. You're pretty much at your 2-year anniversary, actually. So congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
But it's a bi-weekly show for 2 years. I am surprised that there has been enough content in Ace Attorney for 44 episodes.
Yeah, I mean, we've been playing every single game. I believe there are 11 in total, including like the spin-offs. We're currently recording our season on Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright, which is a really fun, unexpectedly enjoyable spin-off. That's not coming out yet. The one that's coming out is still about Spirit of Justice, so that'll be our last season on like the mainline games. So we're getting around to the end of it, but it's been a really, really good journey for sure.
So what's the goal of this podcast? Is there a reason it's out in the world, or is it like, this is fun for us?
Yeah, definitely the second thing. I think for me, the goal is like, I always want to be talking about Ace Attorney at all times. I first played it when I was like 12 years old, and I have never stopped being obsessed with it. So it was just a really good opportunity for me to like get to hang out with a good friend of mine who hasn't played them before, like introduce them to him, and also just talk about them for like an hour every 2 weeks, which is what I ideally would like to do all the time.
I have admittedly never played an Ace Attorney game.
I mean, highly recommended, but I'm a very biased source of this.
Well, I don't know if this is related or not, because I don't know where Ace Attorney stands for you, but I have a quote from you here. Average games are more interesting than good ones. Explain.
Wow, I don't remember saying that, but I'll stand by it. Yeah, I do think this is related to Ace Attorney, especially after the original trilogy. The original trilogy is a great game. It's a great series of games, I guess. But I think I'm guessing I did say that in relation to the second trilogy, where we seem to have like a lot more to say about it, where it's not just like, oh my god, this game is amazing. Like the trilogy is so good that it's just like, it's honestly hard to be critical about it in some ways. Whereas with the second trilogy, the Apollo Justice trilogy, it's like it's somehow more interesting to talk about. It's somehow there's more that we've been kind of digging into in like a more in-depth way, and I've really been enjoying that. So cool.
You write about all sorts of, you've got some deep research articles on games, and you don't just write about games, you write about online culture in general. But you've also got, I'm curious about, there's obviously a big difference in writing articles like, for example, and this is, I think, 5 years old, foul play, tackling toxicity and abuse in online video games, and then an article like how to get the Flamebreaker armor in Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. Is the latter assigned? Like, how does this work?
Yeah, so, I mean, like you say, I've kind of covered the spectrum, and especially these days, I like to get as much variety as possible, outside of games as well. But those were both assigned, actually, I think, if I remember rightly. Like you said, the other one's like 5 years old at this point, so it's hard to remember. But yeah, with the Flamebreaker armor, I believe that I usually when I'm playing like a big AAA game, I reach out to some editors that I know and say like, hey, just so you know, I'm playing this. If you need guides work on this game, which is like such a huge economy in the games writing space, let me know, and that kind of thing. And I believe that was one where the editor reached out and said like, yeah, we do need a guide on how to get this armor. So I figured it out and wrote it down, and now I hope it's helpful to people.
Do you ever get assigned anything where you're like, this is actually a really hard game and I don't know if I can figure that out?
Yeah, last year, or was it last year that Elden Ring came out? I'm losing track of time at this point, but I was asked to do some Elden Ring guides, and I've never played a From Software game before. So that was intimidating. I mean, generally speaking, like I said, it's usually me reaching out and saying, like, I'm playing this game already, so it's something that I do feel comfortable with, and obviously there is the ability to turn it down if I feel like it's too difficult, but the Elden Ring ones, I had a good friend of mine jump into co-op with me and give me a hand on that, which was extremely... I think I would have struggled a lot without that.
Yeah, I'm actually a huge From Software fan, but I do not subscribe to the whole, like, oh, you're not doing it right if you do co-op. I always do co-op. Yeah. Like, I need it.
I mean, that's the thing, like, that was actually really good fun for me, even though it was, like, work, which is always nice, but I think if I was trying to do it by myself, like, I just would have been really miserable, so... It was definitely like a really good way for me to enjoy the game. And like I said, I wouldn't have played it without the opportunity. So it was really interesting.
Right. And that's you said that in 2022, you had a sort of year in review post on startmenu.co.uk. And you also said something interesting there. You said, are there games I didn't play for work? It's hard to tell. Like, is that good or bad that you can't really shut off the writer's brain when you're gaming?
It is what it is. I think 2022 was like a really intense year for that. I think this year I've been playing more stuff that's for fun. And, I do really enjoy it. But at the same time, like, I am always thinking like, oh, it would be fun to write about such and such a topic within this game. And, I do feel very privileged to have the opportunity to do that. So it's not something that I like to complain about too much. But at the same time, it's like there's a strange balance there, which I think is it's something that a lot of people I know, like a lot of games writers I know, struggle with.
Going back to the different types of articles, is there a type of research you prefer over the other? Like, would you prefer to interview people? Or get deep into some old articles or something, or just playing games,
That's such an interesting question. I really like doing a bit of everything. But I think the thing that's most satisfying for me is always interviewing people. Like, I'm sure you experience this as well, with this podcast, but it's always really nice to talk to people who are really passionate about what they're doing, and I really like kind of trying to draw out the things that people say to me. Like, often, I get to the end of an interview and people are like, oh, I really hope that was helpful. Like, I don't, I haven't had much experience being interviewed or something like that. Because usually when I do these kinds of reported work, it's like community-based features. Like we said, I do a lot of online culture stuff. Even within games, that's kind of my preference to interview people, as opposed to like developers or something like that. I love reading those articles, but it's just not something that I've done so much of. So yeah, I really like taking what those people say to me, and like sort of the process of turning that into a story is probably my favorite thing about writing.
Right. The one that I always get, and thank you everyone who have talked to me, but I always love people go, oh, I hope I didn't ramble too much. And I'm like, please ramble. Like, you're the reason that no one's here to hear me. Like,
yeah, I say the exact same thing. Like, people, like, it's a bit different in writing because we're like taking those quotes and often cutting out the part that's interesting. But I find that when people are rambling, that's when you get those really interesting like gems. So yeah, I say the same thing. I'm always like, no, please, I'm enjoying this. I know this is going to be super useful for me.
In Meet the YouTubers, Turning Speedruns into Incredible Stories, you mentioned something that I've actually thought about a bit doing this podcast. You mentioned that a lot of people in the gaming sphere prefer to be known by their online handles. And the only reason I've thought about this is when I was in journalism school, which is a long time ago, it was such a big deal, to get full names, which I understand is sort of to give legitimacy to the quote, right? You don't want an anonymous source or whatever. But so when I started the podcast way back when, that briefly was something that I thought was really important. And then I realized, no, first off, people should be called what they want to be called. But, also I kind of realized, like, well, it's different in the gaming sphere. Maybe you could equate it to, entertainment as a whole, where people have stage names, whatever. But I'm curious, because you've written for major publications, like, do any of them get, like, bristly when it comes to that? Are they like, I don't want gamer tags?
Yeah. It's funny, actually, when you mentioned that in the article, I'm pretty sure that I wrote that kind of in... I was a little bit annoyed. I was a little bit prickled at something that had happened recently. Not to name any specifics, but there was an outlet that I had worked for who had... sort of pushed to get people's like full names in there when I'm always very open to what people want in that situation. I'll say like I'm sort of this like you mentioned in journalism, the standard is to use your full name, but how do you feel about it? What would make you most comfortable? That's always pretty much what I end up on. And I had just worked on an article with another outlet who had kind of pushed back and said, like, can we get these people's full names? And when I said no, like, they don't want to do that, they had sort of asked for, like, other identifying features. And I just thought it was really, like, it was really off-putting to me, and it seemed very strange. And, that was, to speak more broadly, like, to answer your question more broadly, that was the first time that had happened. And I felt, I think that's why, like, it was so shocking to me, like, usually places are, like, a lot more open to that kind of thing. And, most of what I do is in games and online culture, and it's quite normal at this point, I think. Like, a lot of people have online handles that they'd rather be known by in those specific contexts. But yeah, so I think that that little note in that article was like a response to that thing that had just happened. And I knew that, like, in Eurogamer, where that one is published, like I already knew that they were very accepting of that kind of thing. So I think that was almost like something slipping in from outside, like in my own story, which I always find quite interesting. Like, when I notice that in other people's work as well, like there's this sense that journalists have to be, like, super impartial, and like very outside of the story itself, but I really do think that's just impossible, because you just get these little things that happen to be interesting to you at the time that you're writing, and that kind of influences how things come out in some ways, like in small ways like this.
There's a site I found that has like a huge list of all the reviews you've done of games, and the vast majority say unscored, except for 2 in The Guardian and 1 in PC Gamer. Is that your call? Or is it just when whoever you're writing for, they're like, we need a score, we don't want a score?
Yeah, no, that's based on the outlet. And most places nowadays don't really do scores, at least the ones that I work for. I think it's a really interesting debate. Like, it comes up fairly often in, like, the circles that I'm in, and I don't think that anyone really like scoring. I felt like we were moving away from that. Like, more and more sites were stopping doing that, but recently, actually, Eurogamer, again, to go back to them, I've done a fair amount of work for them. They just reintroduced scoring, and I found that really interesting. I don't think there's like a one size fits all answer for this, and I don't think that like, personally, I prefer unscored reviews, but like I said, I think that there's like pros and cons to both sides of this. I do find, like, like you said, in those couple of examples when I did have to give a score, I found it really difficult. Mm-hmm. I much prefer just kind of laying out my whole thoughts in a review, and then then people are like, oh, well, what does this mean on a scale of 1 to 10? And I'm like, I don't know. That's a hard question.
Yeah, the one that I kind of laughed, PC Gamer, I guess, has a score out of 100.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what's the difference between a 79 and a 78? Like,
yeah, I really don't know. I think that one for PC Gamer was a while ago, but I think I kind of they have like a thing on their website where they kind of lay out, like, here's what the 70s mean. here's like what a high 70 would be or a low 70, and I was like, okay, I'll try and figure it out within this, but it's tricky, I think, for sure.
I actually don't do game reviews, but there was a brief time when I was still in school, because we had to like blog and whatnot, and I was doing them, and I remember specifically saying, I'll never give a 10 out of 10 because nothing can be perfect. It's not possible. And like a week later, I gave L.A. Noire a 10 out of 10, and my friends roasted me. They were like, I'm not reading you anymore. You have done a lot of articles on fan fiction and its preservation. What does fan fiction mean to you? It's obviously an important topic for you.
Yeah. So I around like I guess probably 2019, 2020 really wanted to like break out of just writing about games. Still love games, still write about games a lot, but I think like for me, I mentioned this before, but it's just about variety for me. Like one of the things that I love about writing and especially about freelancing is that I kind of get to do a lot of everything. So I was like, yeah, what can I write about outside of games? And I was a teenager who came up on, Tumblr and sort of these kinds of websites and, read a lot of fanfic when I was a teenager and still sometimes read fanfic. And I just find it such an interesting space. Like I mentioned earlier, again, I love writing about community, like online community and community creations, and especially when there's something that's kind of owned by the community and like that works outside of like the sort of corporate space that takes up a lot of the media. And so I think fanfiction is just a really good example of that, like the main fanfiction site, I wrote a history of it. That was like my longest, most in-depth piece that I've ever written, and it was really focusing. The reason I really wanted to do that was because it's this community-hosted space. Again, like you say, it does a lot of archival work, a lot of preservation work. And I just find it so interesting. Like, again, I do think that fan fiction itself is like a really interesting creative practice, but I just think that it's this space where so many interesting community, like free work, free, like people putting in the work just because they love something so much kind of thing. So that's why I really like writing about fan fiction. And I also think that it's something that can be treated as something very frivolous, but again, I find these connections to like much bigger trends, or like just it's just something that I find super interesting. And again, like everyone I've ever spoken to for these pieces are like so passionate about it, and like I said, that's the thing that I love most, is just getting to talk to people like that. So yeah, those have been really fun pieces to work on.
Can you give us any details, anything you remember about your Star Wars Lord of the Rings crossover fanfic that you wrote when you were a kid?
Oh, you're asking for my secrets? Basically, when I was a kid, I think this is how a lot of kids, especially like young women, get into fan fiction. Just like watching shows that you really like, or like, films in this case, and being like, I wish I was there, like, writing self-insert fan fiction, which is like so denigrated by the community, but also like I think everyone kind of feels that way because they kind of did it when they were a teenager, and it's kind of cringe now, So, I wanted to write a story where I got to hang out with like Luke Skywalker and Legolas, and I did that, and I resist the idea of cringing. Like, it is cringe, right? But like, maybe without that I wouldn't be here, so...
I think you have an article about embracing cringe culture, so...
I do, exactly. And I think it's something that I think is really... it's really important to do, even though I'm like It's cringe, but objectively, what is wrong with that? It's fine. Don't worry.
Where did you fit in there? What were your powers in relation to, Luke Skywalker and Legolas?
That's a great question. I definitely had some kind of powers, but I don't remember what exactly it was. I think trying to remember this is gonna tip me over my threshold for cringe, unfortunately.
Fair enough. You've got some Baldur's Gate 3 writing, and in it you say your main move is pushing enemies off a ledge.
Yes.
What about the loot? You lose the loot.
I know. That is the trade-off, but Baldur's Gate 3 is a hard game. I think this goes back to what we were talking about earlier with doing guides for games, which can be very tricky. I was mostly playing Baldur's Gate 3 for guides, and I had to romance, do all the Act 1 romances. So I was playing the same thing quite a lot of times with different party members and stuff. And I was I gotta get through this. I just gotta push all these people off ledges. And I think that was such a fun, this is what I wrote about in the article, but it's such a fun, translation between tabletop. Obviously Baldur's Gate is so heavily based on D&D. It's just such a fun translation of that into the video game format, where it's you can push all these people off ledges, and they put such an effort into making that every combat encounter have a lot of verticality and stuff like that, and I'm great, thanks, this works really great, and I'm really enjoying just being very very rude and shoving everyone down. And yeah, you're right, missing out on the loot, but that's all right.
There was a point in that game, I'm in Act 3 now, I just got there, and there was a point, it is hard, and I couldn't beat this fight until, I realized, I can push them into the lava.
Well, the reason that, the way that I figured this out is by having my party members shoved off ledges multiple times, and I was okay, well, we got to turn this round on them, I think.
If I may, and I'm so sorry to make this about me, but I had a D&D session yesterday, and I just found this funny. I thought I was so clever. We were attacked by these shadows, and we were in a camp area, and I thought, being so clever, I stomped out the fire. So it's no light, no shadow. Yeah. And the GM was the shadows go invisible. They're still there, you just can't see them.
Oh, no.
Didn't go well.
I think, God, this is off topic, but I think I really enjoy hearing other people's D&D or tabletop stories, and I know I think that's a controversial thing to say, right? People are oh, it's telling someone about your dreams or whatever. But then again, I'll listen to someone talk about their dreams. I love any kind of just tell me any kind of story. I don't care.
What non-D&D TTRPG would you most like to see a video game based on?
Oh no, that's such a good question, and there are so many options. I don't know whether this would translate well, but I just got done playing, a couple of months ago at this point, got done playing a long campaign of Orbital, which is a GM-less storytelling, collaborative storytelling game. And I can't stop thinking about it. I'm so obsessed with all the characters that we created and the world that we created and stuff, that that has to be my answer, even if I don't know how it would translate at all. Just because I can't stop thinking about it. So I think everyone should play Orbital. Highly recommended.
Tell us about News from the Marble States. It's, in your words, it's an experimental world-building exercise. It's short stories in the form of journalism from a spacefaring future.
Yeah, that's an interesting project. Actually, related to this Orbital game somewhat is that God, where to start? There was a few things that happened at the same time. It's we just finished this Orbital game, and I was I really want to write, I want to write fiction that's set in this universe. And then I was I kind of don't want to do that because it's it feels so much like a shared creation by me and the other players who were in that game. So I would rather invent my own universe, right? And then there was also a sort of challenge that a YouTuber that I enjoy. I'm not sure what their real name is, but like the channel is called Truthless, and they were like, "Oh, we're doing this project where you make some kind of art, like whatever your format is, make something every week with like based on the alphabet letters, right?" And I was like, okay, I want to write like short stories to build like my own universe. Similar, it does share a lot of similarities with the orbital universe that we created, but I wanted it to be something that's like more of my own creation. And I was like, okay, I want to work on short stories, but like, I know that's going to take me quite a long time, and I don't know whether I can do that every week. So I was like, well, the thing that I know how to do is to write journalism, right? Like I feel like I have so much practice in that even if it's fictional and even if I'm just coming up with stuff, I feel like it'll flow a lot easier for me. And they can be a lot shorter than full short stories. And it's been a really fun activity. Like I do find that it comes so naturally to me to like write like a little news piece. Like I don't know, something about the rhythm of that, even if it's fiction, is very satisfying to me. So I've really been enjoying that. Although I have missed a couple of weeks, especially I missed this week because I was traveling, but that's okay. We'll work through it.
I think it's cool. In a world building sense, you have more than one writer. You have two different people so far in your bylines. Lucia Lipins, I'm totally not getting that right, and Dorian Enver.
Yeah, I couldn't have told you off the top of my head what their names were, so you did better than me. Yeah, I think originally I was like, oh, I should like have a lot of different news sites, I guess it would be, or like newspapers, and different writers, but then I thought, like, actually a lot of these feel like they're going to have been written by the same person, like a political editor at a website. So I'm looking forward to kind of exploring more on that and seeing where it takes me. It's very much like, I use a random word generator for the alphabetized part because it's not like super important to what I'm doing here. And so it's very much like, okay, like where can I take this and just sort of an exercise in creativity. Yeah, I'm really enjoying it, actually. It's different from what I usually do, but like I said, I'm always trying to do something different, variety and branching out and that kind of thing. So this is a fun exercise.
Well, another different thing you've done, you worked on, as a dialogue editor, you worked on the game The Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood.
Yes.
And one of my questions was going to be, what's it like seeing your name in a game's credits? And then I realized you're in Minecraft's credits, which, there's probably no bigger game out there, so...
Yeah, it's interesting actually because I've only been in Minecraft's credits for like I'm not sure when they added it, but I've been working there for about a year. But I work on their book. I'm the publishing editor, so I work on the books and the magazines and stuff that they work on. So it doesn't really feel the same as having my name is in the game credits, but it's not for working on the game, I guess. Whereas working on Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood was like really enjoyable to be like, wow, I worked on a game, like after having written about them for so long and obviously played them for even longer. That was such a great project. And if I can just like be super enthusiastic about the game itself, like I always feel weird doing this because it's hard to hype up one's own work, but I feel like with Cosmic Wheel Sisterhood, like I really didn't everything that is so good about that game is not like my editing. It's like the writers and the artists and everything. I genuinely think that game is so great, like outside of any input that I had. So I really recommend playing it, and I don't get any like bonus from saying that. And like it doesn't actually, I am biased, but I really hope that people will. I mean, it seems to have had such a great reception, and I'm so happy for that whole team.
When you play it, are you ever like looking at the dialogue? You're like, I could have done that different.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I am. Like, I haven't played it again since. Like, I was playing it chapter by chapter as it was. Like, I would play the chapter first, and then I would go into like the spreadsheet and like edit everything. But like when I was originally doing it, there was no save system at that point because obviously it was still in development. So I would like play the first few chapters again, and I would be like, oh, maybe I should go back in and change something. But it's very like editing is not. I mean, it's the same as writing, right? Like there's no like objectively correct way of doing it. So it's always just like, it's the same as reading back your own writing and thinking, oh, I could do better, but you know, at some point you just have to trust yourself.
What's on the horizon here? We've talked about how many different things you do. What can we look forward to?
Yeah, a bit of everything. That's what I'm always hoping to do. My contract with Minecraft ends in February, so that'll mean that I get to do a lot more writing, which I'm really looking forward to. Would love to edit on another game, but I haven't had the opportunity to do that yet, so we'll see. And what else? Yes, like I said, we will be moving into the Professor Layton versus Phoenix Wright version season of Turnabout Breakdown soon, which I'm really looking forward to because, like I said, that has just been such a delightfully, like, surprisingly fun game to play. So.
All right. Well, Jay Castello, people can check you out at your website, JayCastello.com. Thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. It was really great to talk to you.